Most people think the BTK killer got off easy. But what if his real punishment was worse than death? August 18, 2005. Dennis Rader stands before a judge in Sedgwick County, Kansas, and hears the sentence that will define the rest of his life. 10 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, a minimum of 175 years behind bars. The BTK killer, the man who murdered 10 innocent people and terrorized Wichita for over 3 decades, is led away in shackles to Dorado Correctional Facility. He will never breathe free air again. Most people think Rader got off easy because Kansas had abolished the death penalty years before his arrest. Many families of his victims were furious. They wanted to see him executed. They felt cheated by the system. But what if those people were wrong? What if the punishment Dennis Rader has been living through for the past 20 years is actually far more devastating than a quick execution could ever be? What if sitting in that cell has slowly destroyed him in ways that death never could? By the end of this video, you are going to understand why many believe that life imprisonment in solitary confinement is not mercy, it is long-term psychological devastation. And I want you to tell me in the comments whether you agree with that. Also, does this punishment actually match what Dennis Rader did? 10 murders, families destroyed, an entire city living in terror for decades. Is what he is experiencing right now true justice or something else entirely? Let me know, because this is going to get controversial. The families of BTK's victims stood up one by one and spoke directly to Rader. They called him a monster. They said he did not deserve to live. They told him they hoped he would rot in prison for every day he had left on earth. Rader received the maximum prison sentence, ensuring he would not be released, as Kansas did not have the death penalty at the time the crimes were committed. The judge made it clear, "You will die behind bars, Dennis Rader." Then he did something interesting with the math. He stacked those 10 life sentences consecutively, not concurrently. His earliest possible parole date was set for February 26, 2180. That is not a typo. The year 2180, which is 155 years from now. Why bother with such an absurd number? Because the judge wanted Rader to wake up every single morning and know with absolute certainty that he would never leave that prison. No appeals process, no hope of sentence reduction, no possibility of parole. Just decades of the exact same existence until his body gives out. Here is what makes this different from death row. Death row inmates have something to fight for. They have lawyers working their cases. They have appeals they can file. They have execution dates that provide an endpoint. Dennis Rader has none of that. He just has time, endless, crushing, meaningless time. And that might be the most psychologically devastating punishment the justice system could have designed. What does that time actually look like for Dennis Rader? His cell measures 6 feet by 9 feet. That is 54 square feet of total living space, smaller than most bathrooms. 3 walls are solid concrete, the 4th wall is steel bars. A metal toilet, a sink, and a thin mattress on a concrete slab. One tiny window that barely lets in any natural light. And for Dennis Rader, this routine never stops. This cell is his entire universe now. He is not in the general population. He is in administrative segregation, a polite term for permanent solitary confinement. Other inmates have threatened him repeatedly. So prison officials decided the only way to keep Dennis Rader alive was to isolate him completely. 5 days a week, he gets 1 hour outside his cell. Not to socialize, but just to exercise in another concrete box and shower. The other 2 days, he stays locked in that cell for 24 straight hours. His meals arrive through a slot in the door. 3 times a day, a tray of food slides through that narrow opening. No words exchanged, just metal scraping against metal and then silence. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning in a space smaller than your bathroom and knowing you will spend 23 hours in that exact spot. Then doing that again the next day. And the day after that, for 20 years straight. Every single morning is identical. Every evening you know tomorrow will be exactly the same. Research on long-term solitary confinement shows it causes severe psychological damage after just a few months. People start hallucinating, hearing voices, losing their ability to think clearly. Their sense of time becomes warped. Some inmates begin talking to themselves constantly just to hear a human voice. The human brain was not designed to function in complete social isolation for years on end. Dennis Rader has been living this way since August 2005. Nearly 20 years of almost zero human interaction. The same four walls, the same stale air, the same mechanical sounds day after day. And his body is falling apart. In 2023, something shocking happened. Carrie Rawson visited Rader in prison and reported him as rotting and unhappy, saying he has lost like 7 inches and is in a wheelchair. This was her first visit in 18 years. Oklahoma investigators had asked her to help them with cold cases they think Rader might be connected to. What she saw horrified her. But what was happening to his body was only the beginning. He had severe scoliosis, his spine so curved he could barely move. He had no teeth left, so his face had collapsed inward. His legs were wrapped in bandages. She said it took him a moment to even recognize who she was. In letters Rader had written before that visit, he mentioned he was pretty sure he had suffered a stroke. His handwriting had changed, his short-term memory was failing. He forgot things constantly. He wrote about severe pain that made it impossible to stand or exercise. You are aging rapidly with limited mobility, cognitive decline setting in, no proper medical care, no physical therapy. Every day your body works a little less effectively. Every week you forget a few more details. And you know this will continue getting worse until you die alone in that cell. But the physical destruction is only part of the story. What is happening psychologically might be even more devastating. But even as his body continued to fail, his past refused to stay buried. Dennis Rader cannot escape his past, even locked away in that concrete box. In 2023, law enforcement, particularly the Osage County Sheriff's Office in Oklahoma, publicly named Rader as the prime suspect in the 1976 disappearance of 16-year-old Cynthia Dawn Kinney. She was last seen at a laundromat in Pawhuska, Oklahoma. Her body has never been found. How did investigators connect Rader to this case? In 2008, he wrote a letter from prison describing exactly where he had buried trophies under his old property. When authorities dug up that spot, they found items belonging to at least one woman along with bondage materials. Around the same time Kinney vanished, Rader had written in one of his journals the phrase "bad laundry day." Investigators believe that might reference her abduction. So imagine sitting in that tiny cell. Your body is failing, your mind is deteriorating, you spend 23 hours a day staring at concrete walls. And then every few months detectives show up to question you about murders you might have committed 40 or 50 years ago, crimes you have never been charged with. The questions never stop, the investigations never end. There is no statute of limitations on murder. He denies committing any murders beyond the 10 he confessed to. Investigators do not believe him. They keep digging through his past, searching for evidence, trying to connect him to cold cases across Kansas, Oklahoma, and Missouri. Even after 20 years of punishment, he cannot escape what he did. The past sits in that cell with him every day. And then in 2024, the darkest secret of all came to light. And just when it seemed his story could not get any darker, investigators uncovered something nobody expected. At CrimeCon 2024 in Nashville, Tennessee, Carrie Rawson revealed that cold case investigators had uncovered a journal entry from Rader that read Carrie BND Game 1981, where BND was his shorthand for bondage. Carrie was born in 1978, which means in 1981 she was only 3 years old. Carrie said multiple experts told her it is very possible her father sexually abused her, and she stated she is 100% sure he harmed her when she was little. She confronted him about it during that 2023 prison visit. And for the first time ever, she saw the mask completely drop. He stopped pretending to be the loving father and became BTK right in front of her. He denied everything, gaslight her, refused to give straight answers. She said she thought for a minute she was 16 again, fleeing his angry fists, but she came back, sat down, and confronted him harder. This is the man who writes letters to his family, constantly claiming they occupy most of his thoughts, who says he misses them dearly. But he is also the man who terrorized Wichita for 17 years, who murdered 10 people in cold blood, who taunted police with letters, and who apparently abused his own daughter when she was too young to remember. Does knowing this change how you view his punishment? Does it make his current suffering seem more justified, or does it complicate the question of what justice actually means? Dennis Rader is currently 80 years old, serving his sentence at Dorado Correctional Facility. His body is broken, confined to a wheelchair, racked with pain from severe scoliosis. He has lost his teeth, possibly suffered a stroke, deals with short-term memory loss and cognitive decline. He spends 23 hours a day in a 6 by 9 foot concrete cell. He gets 1 hour to shower and exercise if his body can even handle it, which most days it cannot. Other inmates shout insults at him through the walls. They have made clear what would happen if he were ever placed in the general population. Food arrives through a slot in his door with no words exchanged, no human contact. He watches television and listens to the radio because without those things he would completely lose his mind. And every few months investigators show up to question him about murders he might have committed decades ago. He has no appeals process, no hope of release, no lawyers fighting for his freedom. His parole date is set for the year 2180. That is the justice system telling him, we want you to know you will die in this cell, and there is nothing you can do about it. This is what worse than death actually looks like. It is not dramatic. There is no final moment, no execution date to count down to, no closure for anyone. Just endless identical days stacked on top of each other, watching yourself deteriorate physically and mentally with no purpose, no hope, no possibility of anything changing until your organs finally fail. Death row inmates at least have an ending to their story. They have execution dates, they have appeals, they have lawyers working on their cases. Dennis Rader has none of that. His story has no conclusion except waiting for biological failure sometime in the next 5 or 10 years. So here we are. Is this justice? Dennis Rader murdered 10 people. He destroyed countless families. He terrorized an entire city for over 3 decades. He showed no remorse. He taunted police with letters. He took photographs of his victims as trophies. Nobody is disputing what he did. But does 20 years of solitary confinement equal justice for those crimes? Is watching him deteriorate slowly over decades what justice looks like? The families of his victims said they wanted him to suffer, and they got their wish. Dennis Rader suffers every single day in ways most of us cannot comprehend. His existence is pain, isolation, and the crushing knowledge that it will never end. But when we sentence someone to decades of isolation that destroys their mind and body, when we create a punishment that resembles long-term psychological devastation, what does that say about us as a society? I am not saying Rader deserves sympathy. I am not saying he should be released. I am not even saying his punishment is too harsh. What I am saying is we need to be honest about what we are doing here. This is not just locking someone up. This is deliberately creating conditions designed to destroy a human being over decades while making sure they stay conscious enough to experience every moment of it. The state of Kansas could not execute Dennis Rader because the death penalty had been abolished. So they found something else. They gave him time, endless, crushing, purposeless time. And that might be the most fitting punishment for someone who stole so much time from others. But it also might be something worth examining more closely. If we accept that this kind of punishment is justice, then we are saying that prolonged suffering is a legitimate goal of our criminal justice system. And maybe you agree with that. Maybe you think Dennis Rader deserves every second of what he is going through. But if that is true, then we need to stop pretending we abolished cruel and unusual punishment. We need to admit we just found a more acceptable way to inflict it. So I am asking you, does this punishment fit the crime? Is life imprisonment in solitary confinement better than the death penalty, or is it actually worse? Is justice being served in Dennis Rader's case, or have we crossed a line? And if you were sitting in that judge's chair in 2005, if you had the power to sentence Dennis Rader to anything you wanted, what would you have done differently? Think about that and drop your answer in the comments. Do you think what is happening to Dennis Rader right now is justified, or does it cross a moral line? Would you prefer to see someone like him executed, or do you think this slow destruction is exactly what he deserves? There are no easy answers here, and I genuinely want to know what you think. This is not just about Dennis Rader. This is about what kind of justice system we want to have and what we believe punishment should accomplish. Leave your thoughts below and let me know if this video changed your perspective on life imprisonment versus the death penalty. If you found this deep dive valuable, make sure you subscribe to Prison Shade, because we are going to keep exploring the darkest corners of true crime and the complicated questions they raise. I will see you in the next one.